welcome to Style to Impact Live. If you're here live, thank you very much for being here. Let me know in the chat that you're here. If you're watching the replay, thank you very much for coming back and listening to today's conversation. I really do appreciate seeing the engagement in the chat. This lets me know that these conversations are creating a meaningful impact on your life and that you're enjoying it as well. So thank you very much for engaging in the chat and letting me know that you're here. I like to start off these conversations with a wellness check-in. I think it's important for us to take a moment to pause and to reflect, to really tap in to see how we're doing and how we're feeling. And of course, what is it we need to intentionally show up for ourselves? So let me know in the chat how you're doing today, how you're feeling, what's happening in your neck of the woods. As you can see, I am like super prepared and ready. I'm so ready for warm weather, for spring, for summer. So I just decided that since it's cold today, I'm going to add a little bit of extraness to my outfit to help me feel a little bit more confident and vibrant as I come to you with this conversation today. If you're new to this space, I'm Salita Roberts. I'm the founder of Style to Impact. And I truly believe that representation is not just you being in the room or having a seat at the table, but it's also about how you show up. And it's this belief that really drives the work that I do as an image stylist, which is to help create and develop personalized style for women who are ready to change the world, lead successful businesses, and finally feel as confident and fierce on the outside as they do on the inside. If that's you, let's connect. On the eve of Black History Month and the beginning of Women's History Month, I thought it's important for us to continue these conversations of the biases that women face, particularly women of color, and really amplify these stories to be able to create the changes that we need. Because oftentimes in a particular month when we're celebrating something like Black History Month, it's like in the month of February, Black history and the work that we're doing and the biases and the challenges that Black women face and Black people are facing is amplified, right? And then as we step into a new month, as we are with Women's History Month this month, the conversation around those challenges that that we're still experiencing can be diluted, can be put on the back burner in some cases. So I thought it was important for me to continue the conversation and to encourage you to continue the conversation and seeing how every month we can, instead of just focusing on one specific challenge that we're having as a people, as women of color, is to have that conversation continue. And so I wanted to talk about today as we step into Women's History Month and really continuing that conversation of how can we embrace diversity and really smash appearance bias, especially for us as women of color, because we know appearance bias and gender equality, they all go hand in hand. When we think about the perception and how we're perceived as women, and then you add another layer to that, how we're perceived as women of color, right? The challenges and the roadblocks that are standing in our way like greater, it's amplified to a larger degree. We're now talking about the concrete ceiling for Black women and women of color that we have to break through, and that is like concrete. I don't know if you've ever hit your elbow on concrete, but it hurts, right? So if we have to not only show up in a particular way to appease what society thinks that how we should be and how we should show up, and still have to navigate the challenges that is placed in front of us like a concrete ceiling, then you can only imagine the toll that will take on us. And so I think about this conversation that I was truly, truly inspired by getting a chance to listen to is this conversation on LinkedIn a week ago with Bozoma St. John and Ty Heat. And they were talking about Bozoma St. John's book and also, how she navigated the corporate space, being a Black woman, being so authentic and showing up so authentically. And one of the things that, they're talking about living, Bozeman was talking about this idea of living an urgent life, right? Which is based on her book, The Urgent Life, My Story, Love, Losses, and Survival. And I thought about how we're all surviving something, right? We're all trying to survive something. And sometimes in that survival mode, we're giving up a lot of ourselves. We're giving up a lot of who we are. And, in the process of trying to survive this period in our lives, or trying to survive what challenges we're going through, we can lose ourselves in the process, right? And Bosom, one of the things, like, in that conversation, one of the things that really stood out to me, not only of the idea behind living an urgent life, right? Behind navigating the challenges and being able to show up as your authentic self, but she talked about, diversity is not this idea that when we talk about diversity, when companies are talking about, oh yeah, we have a diversity program and we support diversity in our workplace, this is something that we encourage, they look at the numbers, like what are the numbers to support this. But Bozema was talking about this idea of diversity being not about the numbers, but about the relationships, giving grace and empathy and respect. And so she was talking about, as Black women and women of color, when we're entering the workforce, when we're entering corporate, when we're doing anything in life, right, when we're showing up, we oftentimes, walk into a space, using, instead of coming in at 100%, energy at 100%, we're coming in at 60% because we're using 40% of our energies trying to figure out if we're being too much, trying to tone down our appearances, trying to, wondering if, maybe if you wear your hair today, like you change your hairstyle today, how complicated it is to walk into a space and having to explain that. And so we look at ourselves every single day that we're getting dressed, and we're removing layers of ourselves, right? We're removing layers of who we are, trying to fit into this narrative of who we should be and how we should show up in order to be successful. And that 40% of energy that we're using to decide which parts of ourselves that we have to shed, that we have to put in a box, is energies that we could be using to really use our voice, to advocate for ourselves and amplify the things that we want to do. And so it's, for me, it's very important that we have this discussion, that you reclaim your 40%, right? Because you're competing, as Bozema said, it's like you're competing with someone else who's walking into a room, coming in 100% as themselves, don't have to worry about all the things that you're worrying about. And as a result, it starts to affect you mentally. It starts to affect your self-esteem and your confidence and everything about you. And so embracing diversity and smashing the appearance bias for women of color, for me, is a conversation that I want us to continue having. It's a conversation that I think is important when we think about the work that you may be doing as a company in terms of your diversity and your inclusion strategy, is to include this type of conversation in that, this type of a conversation that looks at how women of color are being perceived based on their appearance. What opportunities are they being denied because they don't fit into this mold of what we think they should be and how they should show up, right? And I like this idea of, when we think about embracing diversity, it's widening your view. It's widening your lens to include, to understand, and to respect that the women that are walking through your door, specifically women of color, we're coming from different backgrounds, experiences, and it doesn't make us less qualified to do the job if we walked in with our natural hair. It just means that this is who we are. But you, as an organization, as an individual that's in these decision making roles, especially in the hiring stage, especially in the leadership dynamics in your company, have to understand this, have to widen your lens beyond what you would have been told as an individual as to what it means for women to show up professionally, as to what it means for, this idea of what the professional image looks like, right? You have to widen and understand that as individuals, we bring into every space that we're in a unique perspective. And that unique perspective also includes how we show up, right? And so creating a safe environment for women of color to enter into the workforce, to enter your organization, to do business with, means that you have to look beyond the numbers as an organization. You have to look at the individual merit, what they bring to the table, and not focus on these biases that we see and hear about when it comes to appearance. And so for those of you who are like, okay, Salida, what is appearance bias? And just give you a brief definition of what that is. Appearance bias is a form of discrimination and judgment based on how someone looks, comparing how that person looks to what the beauty standards are, like this Eurocentric idea of what beauty is. It's this idea that to your appearance need to fit into this particular description. Straight hair, maybe thin, maybe blue eyes, blonde hair. But as we can see, the world is not one dimensional. It's not one group of people living in the world. We have so many races and ethnicities and backgrounds that we're seeing in the world, right? And so we cannot expect women of color to show up looking like another group of people who they're not, right? And so that is what appearance bias is discriminating against women of color, because there's a double standard when it comes to appearance, right? Women of color, we're facing discrimination against our appearance, we're facing discrimination against our race, our ethnicity, our identity. Every single thing about us we're facing, because parts of society is saying, oh, to look professional, you can't come with your hair braided. You can't come with colors. You can't, be expressive with your hands and your voice. It's like, no, we need you to be docile. We need you to be subdued. We need you to look this particular way, because that's how they define what professionalism looks like and what they define having the right appearance for the job looks like, when that is not true, right? And so when we think about dismantling and smashing appearance bias, we have to look at how do we assess what are we doing in the spaces that we're in to make it safe for women of color to bring their full and authentic self. And unfortunately, there's statistics that shows that appearance bias, when it comes to the opportunities that women of color are denied and not given, and how they're being just looked at in a different light, and how we're being judged based on our appearance is there. It's sad that we do have statistics on this, because this should not be the case, right? For Latin women, we're told that, Latin women, the studies have shown that, oh, they're seen as too provocative, like, so don't wear any red, don't wear bold colors, try to tone down what is your personality, right? They're told that for Black women, when it comes to their natural hair, 2 in 5 are seen as unprofessional. Natural hair for Black women is seen as unprofessional. Like, I am still, like, my mind is still blown by that idea that something that's growing out of my being, my body, that makes me who I am, that there are parts in this world that is looking at it saying, oh, you need to change your hair because that's not professional. You need to not come in with your braids and your locks and everything that makes you you, because we don't think it meets the culture and standard that we're expecting. Right? I'm still baffled by that. And so there's this example, to give you an example of this, in 2018, a Black female judge in Louisiana wore a head scarf in the courtroom, and she was told that it violated court decorum. Let's think about that. Let's think about that for a moment. A head scarf worn by a Black judge in Louisiana was seen as violating court decorum. Now, I did 2 years, studied 2 years of law. And I did two law for me because I did Cambridge law and Caribbean law. And looking at Cambridge law, the way the judges entered the courtroom wearing that white, I'm not sure what they call it, braided hair. For those of you who are in the legal profession, let me know what it's called, where they put this wig on, and it didn't matter what your race were or what your nationality or ethnicity, you had to wear it. So you had Black women and Black people wearing this wig that was, it looks like silver, it looks like white on their head. And we thought that was in keeping, with the decorum of the court, right? And so if this judge wore that, we would have seen it as, oh, it's acceptable because that was the European standard that was given to us in terms of what the courtroom looks like and how judges should dress and what they should wear and how lawyers should dress and what they should wear. But here is it, this Black judge is wearing a headscarf. Now, that headscarf can be for religious reasons. That headscarf can be for personal reasons and self-expression, but we're saying it's not. In this day and age, we're saying that it is not professional. And those are the things that we have to look at when it comes to appearance biases, because wearing a headscarf does not negate, does not stop that judge for looking at the law and doing her job. It does not. But someone somewhere decided that it does not, her image does not fit the narrative that we would have seen, the narrative that's there. Even looking at Serena Williams, for example, another example of where appearance, the way she appeared and the way she showed up was judged differently from other women on the tour. That I'm like a tennis fanatic. Tennis is something that I watch. Unfortunately, I don't play, which is kind of sad. My sister always tell me that. But I've watched other women, like what they would have worn and being celebrated for what they're wearing and how, how they're showing up and being themselves. But Serena Williams, every single time she steps on the court, it's always a conversation. It's always a conversation of, you have some of us in the one corner going, oh my gosh, love it, love that outfit, love the fact that she's bringing so much of herself to on the court, and how she's changed the dress code and what it the tennis uniform that she ultimately did that herself, and Venus really changed what the dress code looked like for the style of dress for women on the tour. But on the other side, there is that section that's looking at her, what she's wearing and criticizing it. And if you remember at the French Open when she wore that onesie, and it was deemed as, oh no, it was the cat suit they called it, because it's like a onesie cat suit, which for her at the time, it was for medical reasons, because she does suffer from blood clot, and she was wearing as part of that, like to stop it. But the powers that be saw it as, oh, it does not fit tennis decorum. It does not fit into the dress code of what women should wear on the tour. And no, I don't have access to the dress code and the policies for these tournaments, but there is nothing in what she wore that made it feel as though, she was disrespecting the sport, right? Ultimately, that is when I look at it, that is what I'm looking at. Does the clothing that you're wearing, is your appearance disrespecting the court? And this disrespecting the sport or disrespecting the work environment. And so when we think about disrespecting, and for me, and I think about it, it's like, how can we assess if it's disrespecting, right? And to assess that, it means I use this really far out analogy is, you would not wear a bathing suit in the boardroom. That is disrespecting. Serena wearing a quote unquote cat suit onesie for medical reasons does not disrespect the dress code for the professional dress code for tennis, at least in my opinion. The judge in Louisiana wearing a headscarf does not disrespect the dress code in the courtroom. And so these are some of the examples where women of color are being negatively impacted and judged based on their appearance, based on them having the audacity to say, I want to show up as my authentic self, whatever reason that is, and I want to be respected for that, right? And so when women of color decided and Black women decide to show up and be themselves, like not spend that 40% of energy trying to remove parts of themselves, they're faced with microaggressions, right? They're 2 times more likely to face with these type of microaggressions where, being told to go home and change their hair, being told to that what they're wearing is not professional, being told that they need to make a change in how they're showing up in terms of their appearance. And these type of microaggressions can have a significant impact on their self-esteem, like feeling insecure, diminish their confidence. And if I'm feeling insecure, if I'm feeling my self-esteem is low, then I'm not able to show up in my job, in my business, in my career, and really have the impact that I want to have in my career, and being able to contribute to the teams and the organizations that I'm in. And then organizations and those in position of power is going to look at the women of color and say, oh, you're not performing at your best. But it's difficult to perform at your best when you're dealing with this concrete ceiling, when you're dealing with having to dispense this amount of energy, wondering if you fit into this narrative and not being able to show up as yourself. Right? It could impact your, women of color find that, not being able to show up as themselves and having to code switch and having to just put who they are in this box to be able to get some form of respect and recognition of work at work creates anxiety and depression. I mean, think about it. Think about if you had to every single day of your life, if you're not a woman of color, every single day of your life that you get up and you go into the world, that you had to remove parts of yourself. What type of toll would that take on you? What type of impact would that have on your work, on your business, and on your career? And so when we're talking about embracing diversity and smashing appearance bias, we have to look at it from both the organizational level and the individual level. At least that is how I want us to approach it, in terms of what can organizations do to dismantle it, and what can we do as individuals to smash it, to break appearance bias, to feel and to be ourselves. And so to do that, we have to have the audacity. And yes, I am daring you to have the audacity, the willingness on an organization level, to have the willingness to take on this challenge that your Black employees, that women of color within your organization are saying to you, this is a challenge and a struggle for me. This is how I feel that my appearance is being judged. And as a result, I'm losing opportunities. You can't just say diversity and inclusion is important to us, but you have to show your employees, your women of color, that something as important as how they show up into the spaces that they're into your organization, that you support them bringing their full and authentic self. Diversity and inclusion is more than, putting up Black squares. It's more than making a pledge on your website to say that that's what you do. But the question is, are the women of color and Black employees in your organization, are they feeling a sense of belonging? Do they feel like they can be themselves? Do you, when you're having one-on-one assessment with them, have you ever asked them, if they feel as though they can't bring their authentic self? Do they ever feel like their appearance is, like they have to play this game in terms of what their appearance is? Ask them those questions. Have the audacity to say, we will not have an environment where women of color cannot bring their whole self into the workplace, where their appearance is being judged, and as a result, they're losing out on opportunities, right? Diversity requires you to widen your lens, to understand that there are different identities, races, religions, ethnicities that's walking through your door, and you have the audacity. You have to have the audacity to say, I am going to create the change within this space, and I'm going to show you beyond saying, oh, we just hired 2 women of color in the C-suite. Or it's like, no, are you creating the environment for them to do that? And on the individual level, as individuals, as women of color, having the audacity to challenge the concrete ceiling and challenge the biases when it comes to your appearance that's in the world and you may see in your workplace is, first of all, speaking up, saying it, telling someone. And then the other is really releasing the fear that if you walk into your organization today wearing your natural hair, for some reason or not, you're going to be fired. And if you're fired because you embrace an aspect of who you are in your appearance, then that environment was not for you. Then it also means on the organizational level that they need to do some work. So are you going to stay and help them do the work if they're open and willing to do it? But if they fire you, you can't help them, right? But when you walk into that, releasing that fear and walking into that workplace as your authentic self, you're reclaiming your 40%. You're not using that 40% of energy trying to shrink to fit. You're claiming that. And you're rewriting those untold stories. The stories that we were told as women of color, when we're entering a corporate space, that, oh, don't go in with your natural hair, try to fit in, don't stand out too much, don't try to be too much. You have to have the audacity to say, this is who I am, and I'm bringing my whole self into this space and deciding which aspect of your whole self that is. Like, you don't have to go full out. You can decide, okay, my natural hair is something that I love and I want to embrace. And so that is having the audacity to say, this is the part of me that I am going to walk into this space in. When I think about audacity when it comes to appearance, Lizzo is someone that, like, you may like her or you may not like her, and the 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 result that you will have when it comes to showing up as yourself. There's some people who are going to like you and some people who are not going to like you. And I like Lizzo for the fact that she advocates and she has the audacity to say, hey, I may be plus size, but I can sing, I can dance, I can perform, I can still do my job. And so we have to stop judging people on their appearance and having more support for body positivity for women and women of color. And that is the audacity that I love to see in her as an individual, that she shows up. The other way of embracing diversity and smashing appearance bias for women of color on the organizational level is through activism. So you had the audacity to challenge that appearance bias should not exist. Now you have to be active. You have to become an activist for this change that you want to see on an organizational level. And one way that I really see, and I really respect LinkedIn and respect Dove for doing this as an organization, as a company, because they're now displaying to their employees that we support you in bringing and being your authentic self, is the idea that they have signed on to really amplify that Black here is professional, to get more states to sign on to the Crown Act. Like currently we have 20 states, I think it is. If your organization is in a state that have not passed the Crown Act, your way of showing that you want to dismantle appearance bias and the biases that women of color face when it comes to how they show up in their appearance is for your organization to publicly sign on to having the Crown Act pass. That's your way of doing it. There are other ways that you can do it, but that's an example of how you can display activism for really dismantling appearance bias for women of color. It's the sign on. And I applaud LinkedIn and Dove for having this partnership where they are now championing the cause for getting the Crown Act passed, but also empowering persons on their platform and persons on the LinkedIn platform, women of color in LinkedIn platforms, and persons across different organizations and different spectrums saying, your Black here is professional and we support you in that. On an individual level, I'm going to repeat this again, and this is about advocating for yourself. The way you advocate for yourself and display your activism is speaking up for yourself. It's when someone says to you, I don't think your natural hair is appropriate or professional, that you speak up on that. I remember this one time in my career, it was like the first time ever. I've never thought of my natural hair being unprofessional until a colleague of mine walked up to me, and she came into my office actually, and she was like, she sat down on my desk and she was like, oh, what have your boss said about your natural hair? And me being Salida, like I'm one of those persons, if you ask me a question that I think is dumb, that I think is disrespectful, I'm gonna ask you the question. I was like, what do you mean? So I was like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, in the front office, there's this perception that the women in the space, you need to have like straight hair, and she went on to describe all these things that when it comes to my appearance, that's expected of me. So I asked her, again, I don't understand. What do you mean? Who is saying that this thing here that all of us have, but we have different textures and it grows in different forms, is going to say to me or is saying to me that this is unprofessional? And that was me advocating for myself, right? Because that conversation started and stopped in that room. No one ever came to me again and asked me about my natural hair, because I decided to show up in my fullness as myself, advocating for myself. And when I did that, that's a colleague asking me that and realizing that, oh, maybe this is not a question I should be asking. And yes, not your natural hair is professional. By advocating for myself, by showing this form of activism for myself, displaying this form of activism for myself, I have now created an environment where the other women of color who may have felt like, oh, they had to wear the weave and wear all these different things, they didn't have to do that, right? That they can embrace who they are and show up in that space. And so that is what happens when you decided to take a stand, when you decided to display your activism by embracing your full and authentic self. You create a space where others can bring themselves, where others may have felt like they couldn't be themselves. You're doing that, right? And in doing that, you've displayed that your courage is greater than your fear. You've displayed that you feel confident and comfortable showing up as your authentic self. And authenticity is activism. Showing up as your authentic self is activism, is you having the audacity to say, I choose me. I want to be free of all these boxes that the world wants to put me in as a woman of color, that I need to shrink to fit, that I need to conform, that I need to, put my hair in a bun, straighten my hair, that I need to avoid wearing colors, that I need to avoid being expressive. I need to avoid, just watching my tone of voice because I don't want to be perceived as being too loud or being angry. In this stage of authenticity is you embracing yourself, is you embracing every aspect of what makes you you, is you accepting your full identity, is you embracing your full self. It's this version of you who no longer apologize for who you are, right? You're updating your LinkedIn profile, you're updating your headshots and rocking your natural hair in whatever form feels comfortable for you. You're being yourself, you're freeing yourself, you're reclaiming that 40%. Because the world will want to tell you that in order to be successful, in order to have a seat at the table, that you have to change who you are to fit someone else's narrative of what you should be. And if we think about it seriously, outside, yes, we do have some occasions, we've all had that, some occasions where someone explicitly came to you and said, your appearance does not match this culture, or you too this, or you too that. Like, we've all unfortunately had those experiences. But you think about it, my sister and I were having this conversation about, how women of color and how Black women prepare for the corporate world, right? We are told that to be successful, we have to put our head down, we have to work 100 times more than our other colleagues to even get a fraction of what they're achieving. And we're told that, to go into the corporate space, to blend in, don't stand out too much, right? And that means what you wear, including clothing and hair, try not to ruffle any feathers, fit into this narrative, right? It's in the universe, like it's out there. But when we were getting prepared for this corporate role, at least in my case, no one actually came to me and said, okay, Salida, now that you entering corporate, wear that black and white suit, don't wear your natural hair, don't speak up, don't try to advocate, don't ruffle any feathers, just put your head down and do the work. Like, no one actually came and said that. And so my sister and I, we were having this conversation of playing the game, because women of color, we realized that to advance in our career, that we have to play the game. We have to play this corporate game. And I'm all for playing the game. And for me, that game is just like if you're running a business and you go to a networking event and you have to meet with people in a corporate setting. That game is that, they have social events, and as an employee, as someone who wants to advance, as someone who wants to have the conversations with the powers that be, that you have to go to those social events, right? That's, for me, it's playing the game. But when it comes to who you are and how you show up, there's no game around that, right? Because we know the impact that it can have on our mental, emotional health, our confidence, and our self-esteem if we are not showing up as our authentic self. Right. And so for me, embracing diversity, it's and smashing the appearance bias for women of color starts with us as individuals, as women of color, changing the narrative. That's me and you changing the narrative, having the audacity to say no more. Displaying our activism for ourselves by advocating for ourselves, and deciding we're going to reclaim our 40% of energy that we're spending trying to be someone else because we cannot, and step into being free, being ourselves in whatever way that means for you. You get to decide what your freedom of self and which parts of your appearance that you want to embrace. And so I challenge you, as we go through Women's History Month, as we just ended Black History Month, and we go through the rest of the year, for you to look at yourself. I need you to go in front of the mirror when you're getting dressed, for whether or not that's going to work, or you're just looking at yourself and how you're showing up. And I want you to think about, what's one aspect of your appearance can you embrace today, right? What is one aspect of your appearance that you can embrace today? If you're here live, let me know in the chat. Like, what is one aspect of your appearance that that you would decide today that you're going to embrace? If you're watching the replay, let me know. Again, I love to see your feedback on this. So thank you very much for joining. If we haven't connected as yet, click the follow button here on LinkedIn on my profile. Send me a DM if you don't want to put what aspect of yourself that you want to embrace today, because I know there's fear surrounding that, and you may not know how to go about embracing and being yourself. I encourage you to send me a message. Let me know what are some of the fear and challenges that you have surrounding your appearance and how you're showing up. Until next time, remember that representation is not just you being in the room and having a seat at the table, but it's also how you are showing up. Thank you for joining me today. Have a wonderful day.